RMJ Movie Reviews back again with my second in the Arnold Schwarzenegger Arnold-a-thon, which is just a lot of fun. I'm trying to do the Arnold movies from the golden era in order, but I kind of switched it around a little bit because one of my subscribers, who's a longtime correspondent, suggested to me, how about I switch it around? So instead of doing Conan the Barbarian, I'm doing Conan the Destroyer first. I think that would make perfect sense to people who are in my age bracket, namely kind of mid, late 30s, early 40s. So, with further ado, we have Conan the Destroyer. Now, what I have right here is the very old DVD that has both films on either side. But in special preparation for this review, I decided to go super old school. So I did away with this, and I actually went very old school and watched. Now, it doesn't have a label on it. It actually, look at that, guys. That is so old school. There's a piece of tape that my mother. Anyway, this is a copy of Conan the Destroyer that my mother taped for me off of the Showtime cable network. I believe probably in 1986, I think is the date I saw in the bumpers. But either way, that was back in the day when Showtime said, Showtime excitement. And it had the Beverly Hills Cop kind of theme over all the bumpers and the Pointer Sisters excitement song all over the bumpers. But either way, on this tape, I'm just going to go through that real quick and get to the movie. But either way, I believe there's a Muppet special anniversary thing that's like basically a clip of the Muppet movies up until that time, which I cannot remember. And I believe there's an episode of Fairy Tale Theater on here, which I think it's Beauty and the Beast. And then the third movie on this tape, because you guys remember VH tape, you could fit like 3-4 movies. I don't know how many hours this tape is. I don't know. This is I don't know, guys. All I know is it says Scotch HG something. I don't know. You can see Conan the Destroyer was right at the end of the tape. But either way, T20? I don't know, guys. But either way, Conan the Destroyer was the last movie on that tape. I used to watch this thing all the time, constantly as a child. It was in particular, it was 2 movies in my household that I dang near wore out the VHS tape. And it was this Conan the Destroyer and the Goonies. I almost this is authentic. This is exactly the same tape from the mid '80s that my mother had, and I found this before we cleaned out the house, but whatever. I hooked it up to my flat screen and actually watched this authentic old school VHS tape of Conan the Destroyer that I enjoyed so much. I watched it again on my flat screen. So anyway, with much further ado, Conan the Destroyer has pretty much, I would say, the character of Conan, period, is basically what sparked my love of Arnold Schwarzenegger and my obsession with Arnold Schwarzenegger throughout the 80s as a child. As I recall, I had seen this film first because my mother recorded it off Showtime, and then I had seen Conan the Barbarian later on. Actually, Conan the Barbarian came out when I was only a baby. I was only, I don't know how many months old, but I was still an infant when Conan the Barbarian was released. But I saw it much later on, I believe I rented it from the video store. I saw it on the WOIO Cinema 19 movie. It was a channel station back in Cleveland in the 80s. They used to run 8 o'clock movies. But obviously as a child, I always enjoyed Destroyer much more than Barbarian. Seeing as how Destroyer, they went a different route. This is way before the trend now to take hardcore R properties and turn them into family friendly, a la Live Free or Die Hard, wider audience previews, Live Free or Die Hard, Expendables 3, that sort of thing. This was way back before studios were even doing that kind of thing. But basically, Conan the Barbarian is a very down and dirty, gritty sword and sorcery movie, and very epic, very just like a grand scale movie. Interesting thing about Destroyer, Conan the Destroyer is a much tighter, it's a shorter movie. Conan the Barbarian, I believe, is 2+ hours. This is like an hour and I think 40 minutes. and the scale is not as huge as Conan the Barbarian, which is really weird. It still has the same beautiful locations like the original film, natural locations, just using the outdoors and using horses, real animals, just real men for your fight scenes and all that. But it just for some reason that the principal cast is a lot smaller. There aren't as many scenes that require these large and large amounts of extras like the original film. And although Barbarian does have elements of sword and sorcery, in Barbarian they try to kind of ground it a little bit in what maybe could be construed as reality back in those ages. But in this film, they pretty much just pump it straight up. This is a flat out comic book. Flat out, this is a Saturday morning cartoon. I will say, digressing a minute, I heard that they're actually gonna redo a film version of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I think if they do, they really need to take some notes from this film, Conan the Destroyer, and Willow, The Never-Ending Story, and Legend with Tom Cruise. I think those are really important films that they ought to take notes from and try to kind of replicate those templates. Probably more something closer probably to Willow and Legend and kind of meld the two. That's my suggestion, Hollywood, if you're watching. But pretty much, Conan the Destroyer here is a comic book movie. They scaled down the main cast. They actually even scaled down a lot of dialogue. Now, in the original film, Schwarzenegger, the character of Conan is not necessarily a guy who spouts monologues, but then again, Arnold Schwarzenegger, this was still in the infancy of Arnold Schwarzenegger becoming the king of action one-liners, because Commando came, I believe, a year after this, so in which case I'm already starting out of order. But Commando came, I think, a year or two after this film. I believe it was a year later. But and also too, they increased the creature quotient, like more really just bizarre kind of creatures. But as in Conan the Barbarian, you could probably, like, you had the witch, the witch that Conan was sleeping with, or you had James Earl Jones kind of literally turning into a snake. Kind of the way it is in Conan the Barbarian, it could kind of be believable that those were species that might have existed. Here, this is just straight up fantasy. You know, you go into the Castle of Mares. They also really make the sets very kind of comic booky. Like I said, the Castle of Mares. They go into these tombs, and in the first one, you kind of look like they could have been crypts, but in this one here, they kind of look more castle-y like really constructed out of like an actual like castle out of a fantasy story. And I like the fact that they bring in more of the fantasy aspect in that. I talked to a lot of movie fans who were teenagers at the time when Destroyer came out, and many of them didn't like it. They hated Red Sonja much worse, but I'll talk about that later, in my opinions on Red Sonja. But for me, I guess it's probably just nostalgia and the fact that I saw this film when I was 5 years old. I have always loved this film. And not to mention, the cast is not at all playing the material straight because, like I said, this is a Saturday morning cartoon. It's not as much heavy emotion. The brutality is turned way down. Not to mention this is a PG-13 rating. But when you watch this film, I mean, this film is clearly overly violent, even for a PG-13 film. There's still a lot of blood. There's decapitations in this thing. I mean, heads literally fly in the air. And I'm kind of shocked at some of the things that my mother didn't want me to see. But then again, we have to remember, she let me watch this film. But we got to also remember, too, guys, this was the mid-'80s. There was no IMDb, there was no internet, there was no streaming, there was no way where you could kind of really monitor these films. You pretty much found out, basically parents back then you'd see a kid, you'd see a PG-13 rating, and you'd say it's okay, and you'd watch it. And once you watched it, you'd find out what it was. That's why I think us children of the 80s are not as sensitive as these kids now, man. I mean, I think we're a little bit more desensitized to gruesome and violence because there was so much of it in kids' films in the 80s, you know. We were exposed to a lot more kind of really unsavory things in our films back then. But there's a lot of gore in this movie. Not to mention this eccentric casting. You have Grace Jones, who Grace Jones has always been. Grace Jones is a phenomenal talent. Um, I wasn't that familiar with her as a singer because a lot of her stuff came out before I was born, and that was something probably that my mother would have listened to back then. Maybe not necessarily my mother's taste, but it would have been something she would have heard in rotation in the '80s or whatever. But regardless, Grace Jones, when actually acting like a performance like she did in Boomerang, or you could say Boomerang is just an extension of the character Zula in this film. Grace Jones has complete raw energy and is completely fearless and just no holds barred, man. She goes all the way. And according to IMDb, she jacked up a couple of stuntmen swinging that stick. And I mean, there's a scene where she breaks a dude's nose, hits him in his private parts between his legs. This is an up close shot, smacks a guy in the side of the face with the thing. This is a violent movie, man. I mean, I was kind of even, I mean, I've seen this thing I don't know how many times, but even watching it again as an adult, I was just kind of like, geez. My mom just recorded this and let me watch this, and I watched this quite a few times as a 5-year-old. So it's wow. I'm surprised I'm such a well-adjusted human being now. And then not to mention you throw in Wilt Chamberlain, which, you know, obviously he's not going to give a performance. I mean, he's there just to be a formidable foe to Arnold Schwarzenegger, which Bambata is his character's name. He is a formidable foe, but I will say when he was guarding the princess, Olivia Di Abalo, I can't remember how you say her name, which I believe, according, if I got this right, I think she was 15, she was a teenager when she made this film, 15, 16, or 17, somewhere within that range, 15 to 17. But she was definitely in Aaliyah territory back then. And the scene where she's screaming, which is annoying, from a bad dream, I love how Will Chamberlain's going, it's only a dream, it's only a dream. And you know, knowing what I know about Will Chamberlain now, I really could have saw that scene taking a real quick unsavory turn, if you know what I mean. But, you know, she does okay with her role. She's just a very naive little spoiled brat, and she's a blonde. And of course, they had to have a blonde in an '80s movie, particularly sword and sorcery movie. Regardless, she's a teenager, show a little cleavage. Sarah Douglas from Superman, basically parts of 1 and 2. Well, let's just say the first 2 Superman movies. The one large Superman movie. She pops up in it to play many of the villainous characters she played back in the day, and she does fantastic. Mako, who's done thousands, he was in the original film. He gets his character extended into this one. Tracy Walter from Batman. You know, I believe he was Bob in Batman. Bob Gunn. You know, that's the one Jack Nicholson shoots. That's Jack Nicholson's boy in real life. He plays a sidekick character named Malik. That's up to you whether you think Malik is annoying or not. He basically follows Conan's every lead. He's a kleptomaniac. He basically is a coward who doesn't jump into battle, but he kills bad guys most of the time after they're already dead. So after Conan and Bambata didn't kill everybody, he'll come up with a knife and stab them after they're already dead. Or if Conan is already handling them, he'll kind of get his 2 cents in. And his particular way of killing people is actually quite painful and gruesome. He has 2 knives. He jumps behind his opponent and stabs into their guts, into their side. I mean, it's really just, especially, you know, just the thought of it is just really just, it reminds me like a shanking in like an episode of Oz or a American Meat Prison movie or something. It's just really crazy. But, this has quite a few gruesome deaths, or in a lot of blood spurts. You can still tell that the MPAA trimmed it, but it's completely enjoyable. And one thing that I do like, not to mention that a lot of the gore and actually the nudity and the physical contact of the first film, the love scenes, obviously there's none here, but I did read that there was one between Sarah Douglas and Arnold Schwarzenegger that was cut from the film because they wanted this to reach a wider audience. I'd be curious to see that. The action sequences this one I think are a little bit more actiony, meaning they got a little bit more fancier with the choreography, although there's a lot of kind of samurai-esque choreography to the sword fights in the original film and some of the action. But I think here it's much more stylized. You're seeing a lot more kind of things that you saw in the 80s with the kicks, and there's a little bit of wrestling with the body slam. There's even one where Conan duels with old boy who's in all the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. The Matthias, I can't remember how you say the guy's name, but he was one of the other guys who killed Conan's parents. The dude had the giant hammer. He shows up here, but he's got a costume on like that. But there's a scene where like they duel on the horses, and the thing that loves about these old school sword and sorcery movies, particularly with a lot of Arnold stuff, Arnold's doing it all. Wide camera shots. So Arnold is literally on that horse. He's twirling it while he's on the horse in one shot, coming at the actor, and they are going at it. One full shot. There is no trickery here. I think that's the beauty of these movies from back then. You know what I mean? And that's why I don't care how much CGI or whatever you put into it with all the fancy super duper special effects. I don't know if you can get back to this era where they got the stones to just do this kind of action. And I'll tell you right now, I could hands down watch any action sequence in Conan the Destroyer and tell you it's better than anything you'll see in a Marvel movie. I can tell you that. I can say that with full confidence. It is. And it's just the fact that it's actually done in camera. That's what makes it better. I don't care if you finesse it and edit it and do close-ups and shaking hands. I ain't talking about all that. No wires. There's no wires in this movie. This is all there. The closest you might see a wire is where Conan is being swung around in a circle in the House of Mirrors. That's it. But the action sequence is a lot more elaborate. There's a little bit more comedy in this film, and you know, look, that's what they were going for, so it works for this movie. Another thing I like to bring out is the orchestral score. I think that's one of the things that, particularly for sword and sorcery movies like this film, what's the gentleman's name who did the music? He's done all of the music. I can't remember how you say his name. Guys, I'm coming. Wait, give me a second. I'm gonna find it on here. Basil Polidoris, Basel. But anyway, he's done movies. He did a couple of Steven Seagal movies. He actually did On Deadly Ground, which is like my least favorite Steven Seagal movie from the Seagal canon. But the music in that movie is fantastic. He did Under Siege 2. He did a very underrated little thriller called Switchback with Danny Glover and Dennis Quaid, and I love that movie. And the score for that movie is phenomenal. And he does phenomenal work here. The score for this movie is just fantastic. And I think that's one of the things that elevates it. He brings back a lot of, and that's what I love about, particularly in sequels from this era, was he continued a lot of the themes, the love theme, the Valerie theme from Conan the Barbarian. He brought back here. And although this film is a Saturday morning cartoon, it doesn't have the weight, it doesn't have the drama of the original Conan the Barbarian. It brings in those themes, and it does bring it brings weight to it, because, you know, not only with everything being scaled down in this movie, the plot is scaled down too. So within, I'd probably say, the first 15 minutes, they tell you what the entire movie is about. Flat out. So basically, the rest of the movie is carried on the action sequences, the charisma of the cast, and the special effects, and the music. That's in the sets, which that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. They tell you Sarah Douglas lays out the entire plot of the movie in her first meeting with Conan, and even potential plot twists. I mean, she says, this is within the first 10 minutes, she looks at Will Chamberlain and says, oh yeah, and by the way, after Conan steals the horn, you make sure you kill him, because Conan must die. And pretty much from there, the movie just goes. You're just waiting for all this stuff to happen. But the thing that's great about Conan the Destroyer is they do it with such glee and so much just charm that you don't care that you know what's going to happen. It's so much fun, you know? But I love Conan the Destroyer. I have always had a complete soft spot for it. I always had a complete soft spot for Conan the Barbarian and Red Sonja. And from my understanding, digressing, the character in Red Sonja was supposed to be Conan. I don't know why he wasn't, because he pretty much is anyway. But I count Red Sonja as a Conan movie because pretty much a lot of the same people who made these films are part of that. But I don't know. To me, I don't care if they change his name. He's Conan in Red Sonja. So I think at least the one thing I'll say about this edition, even though this is a Saturday morning cartoon and Conan the Barbarian is a gritty, epic sword and sorcery movie, I do think that this finishes off Conan's arc from the first film, which is basically him dealing with the fact that he has to get over Valeria. Valeria is dead, and he has to move on with his life. So regardless of all the comedy and the goofy special effects, which I might say the special effects in this I think are very good for an 80s film. I think I believe in the Halls of Mirrors is a scene where Conan sticks his knife through the little goblin hooded guy. I think that was done in camera. Don't quote me, but I think that was done in camera with mirrors around, and they did the reflection. There was neat little tricks they used to do. And I also found out on the commentary, which is posted on YouTube, there's a lot of scenes where they look like there's these elaborate castles that they're actually models. There were cool camera tricks they did in the 80s where like they'd have the actors like all the way like in the foreground, and they'd put like a model like in the foreground as well, and then they do like perspective shots. There was so many cool. There's this one shot where before they go in to actually get the horn in this one building, the building is not even there. It's a miniature, but they did they did the angles in such a way that it looks like it tripped me out. I still watch it, and it looks like a real building to me. I can't even tell the difference, even when I watch it on DVD. I love this film. Oh, also a bit of trivia. Andre the Giant plays the giant Daggett monster at the end of the movie. That was Andre the Giant. And if you guys can find it, I think it's on IMDb. There's a photograph of Andre the Giant and Will Chamberlain holding up Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's such a cool photograph. I want to see if I can print it out because I'm going to put it up somewhere in my house here. But I have always loved Conan the Destroyer. Always loved this film. I basically think they're not really one movie. It has the same character, but one is a Saturday morning cartoon and one is a brutal, gritty, epic sword and sorcery movie. I think if you don't want to sit in for the long, because Conan the Barbarian is a long movie. If you don't want to sit through that 2 hours, you can just easily sit this down for something that's a little bit more simpler. But I've always had a soft spot for this movie. I believe if you can find it on YouTube, guys, Siskel and Ebert, I believe, gave this 2 thumbs up. But this is a great movie, man. People bash it a lot, but look, Conan the Destroyer gets a full pass from me. This is a solid 10 out of 10. I love all the 80s cheese. I love all the goofy one-liners. I love Conan the Destroyer. Thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, ding-a-ling-ding. Don't forget to hit the little bell and leave comments down below about your feelings of Conan the Destroyer. I'm going to be back with my review of Conan the Barbarian, switching backwards, and then I'm going to come with a review of Red Sonja, starring Brigitte Nielsen. Well, really starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, co-starring Brigitte Nielsen, but whatever, as part of my Arnold-a-thon. RMJ Movie Reviews, kids. I'll see you soon.